All right, welcome back to the channel. So Keith Thurman says that Errol Spence Jr. has to come see him in this welterweight division. So it seems like, hey man, I'm actually hoping we can get an Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman fight. And I do believe that there is a way that that could come about. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about the best weight class in boxing. Is it the best weight class in boxing? I don't know. Between them and the lightweights are starting to do some things, man. The lightweights are starting to do some things, but I still think the welterweight division is probably the most stacked division in boxing, definitely with the most proven champions. And the two guys that are the subject matter of this video are definitely at the top or somewhere near the top. One guy's at the absolute pinnacle of it, and the other guy I still think is a top welterweight. So Errol Spence Jr. is the IBF welterweight champion, and he is the WBC welterweight champion, but we will not hold that WBC belt against him. I'm holding the WBC belt against everybody else, man. The WBC is just on something these days, man. They've got the craziest decision-making processes. But Errol Spence Jr. is the WBC champ, and then you have Keith Thurman, who is the former WBA super champ at welterweight, and he is also the former WBC champ at welterweight. Now, and as you see, Errol Spence Jr. holds the WBC belt that used to be held by Keith Thurman, and two of those guys together are some of the top welterweights in the world. Errol Spence Jr. I have as being number one welterweight in the world, followed by Terrence Crawford, and then third is I know that the belts, that Manny Pacquiao has a belt, but I'm not quite sure whether or not he's really the third best welterweight or not, because I have a suspicion that a guy like maybe Sean Porter would be able to beat him. And Danny Garcia would give him a good fight. I think he's actually going to get a really good fight out of Mikey Garcia if they make that happen. But Keith Thurman, I definitely think is still within the top five. Below Manny Pacquiao, obviously, because he beat him, but with the bigger upside than Manny Pacquiao because he's not that old. And there's a real chance that fight was affected by the very long layoff that Keith Thurman has had. But seeing as we are now going into a time where there's going to be where there still is a very big layoff going on in boxing for everybody, this might actually, be an opportunity for Keith Thurman for that rust factor to even out, right? Because nobody's going to be fighting. None of the big time fighters are going to be fighting this year, I don't believe. So, we're looking at what's going to take place in 2021. In 2021. No, so specifically as to what Keith Thurman was talking about, Keith Thurman is saying that he wants to fight with Errol Spence Jr., and Keith Thurman is not leaving the 147-pound division. So he's like, look, Errol Spence Jr. is going to have to see me, and he's going to have to see me because I'm not going anywhere. If he's going to be a champion, I'm going to be here, and he's going to have to fight me. Now, there's a couple ways by which he can do that, right? He can go up the IBF rankings, and he can compete in the WBC rankings, and he can work his way up to becoming a mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. And with the amount of cachet that he has in his name, I think that definitely the WBC would have him way up in the rankings very, very fast. The IBF, I think that the IBF is more of a legitimate. And I do owe an apology, man, because I was having a conversation one time. I don't know if you're watching this video, but I had a conversation with Errol Spence Sr., right? And I had a conversation. This is one of the very few conversations I'll share that I had with somebody inside the boxing world. But I had a conversation with his father one time, and this producer was asking me, who is the best? It was a producer for Fox. And he's like, who? I don't understand these weight divisions. What do you think? Or not weight divisions, the sanctioning bodies. Who do you think is the best sanctioning body? And at the time, I was, still had in my head the Floyd Mayweather Jr., Sophia, the precious belt of the WBC. And I was like, the WBC is probably the most prestigious, but the IBF is probably the best because they're the ones that really do enforce their rules. They seem like they care about the health of the fighters. And if you don't take, and if there's a mandatory position and you don't take a mandatory position, they're willing to strip you. So, the IBF is, I like the IBF, but the WBC has more prestige. He kind of looked at me like, man, because they hate because Errol only had the IBF at the time, right? He didn't. Sean Porter had the WBC, so I think it's necessary to say that much. But anyway, he just kind of gave me this look right now. I know they love and they respect the WBC. Don't get me wrong. Nobody from that camp ever said anything disparaging about the WBC to me, and I didn't say anything disparaging to them about the WBC. But at this point in time, the next conversation I have with people like that, I might have to say something disparaging about them because of the way that they've been handling their business as of late. But back to the subject matter at hand, Keith Thurman can become a mandatory with the WBC, just provided they got enough money to convince the WBC that it's for the greater good of boxing. So he'll be there. And you see that they lined up the Danny Garcia. Like, this is what Danny Garcia's third shot at the WBC title. I think he had one when he won the title. When he won the vacant title, I'm sure he fought for ones down there at 140, but he's getting another shot as a mandatory now. So, the WBC would give him. But really, what I think would probably lead, the most likely scenario that would lead to an Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman fight, which is something that people wanted to see before. So I don't see any problem with people wanting to see it now, okay? The return, all is forgiven with Keith Thurman, in my book, with all these layoffs and my hand injuries and all that. Errol Spence Jr. is at the top of the hill, and Keith Thurman is a former champ and a legitimate fighter, so he deserves his title shot or more so than Mikey Garcia deserves a championship shot against for the WBA that Manny Pacquiao seems like he's setting up. So, hey, man, I'm down with Keith Thurman and Errol Spence Jr. having a fight. Now, the reason why I think that it's a realistic fight is because I don't think Manny Pacquiao is going to fight Errol Spence, especially now that we have, we've had almost a full, he's going to have been out of the ring. Shoot, right now, what is it? If Manny Pacquiao doesn't fight this year, that would be 12, 16 months. So we could be looking at 24 months outside of the ring for Manny Pacquiao, right? Coming back. That's going to be it's hard for me to believe that he's going to then be around another 6 months or another year for the Errol Spence Jr. fight. So that potential fight, I don't know, man. The more time goes on with this Corona stuff, the less likely that fight is to get made. Then also you do have for Errol Spence Jr. the Terrence Crawford fight, but that same scenario applies, but slightly different because Terrence Crawford is not fighting. Terrence Crawford's name recognition is not growing, right? And that's what they said was the issue with making the Terrence Crawford fight, right? Was that he's with another network, and because he's with another network, that means both networks need to get paid. He's got another promoter. The promoter's got to get paid. So the fight, even though the fight between those two guys is a great fight, the politics around it and the finances around it makes it harder to make than a Errol Spence Jr. Keith Thurman fight, because they are already on the same network. So you don't have one network taking their share and another network taking their share. They have the same advisor, right? So they have the same advisor manager, and they're fighting. So no, that's it. And they don't have a promoter. Right, they both have the same fighter, same manager and advisor in Al Heyman, and they don't have a promoter, which means they take the promotional money, and there's more money in even a smaller fight for those guys to fight. So if Errol Spence Jr. is able to get past Danny Garcia, which is going to be a tough fight, Danny Garcia is a real fighter, man. He's a real fighter. Then Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence Jr. is a very realistic fight to make. And it's probably more realistic than the Manny Pacquiao fight, and maybe more realistic than the Terrence Crawford fight. So, but there'll be a lot of people. Obviously, Keith Thurman's going to have to come back and fight somebody else first. just to get on a winning track. So it's not like he's coming off of a loss and the last memory anybody has of him is losing, right? As long as he can get past that, I think the dude can get that fight. Now, what'll happen in the fight? I see it still going with Errol Spence Jr. lawn mowing him, but we'll have to see. We have to see what Errol Spence Jr. looks like coming off the accident and what he looks like coming off the layoff. From everything that he's showing in training, though, he's serious business. His weight is where his weight should be. And he looks active. He looks focused. So we'll see. At the end of it, we will definitely see. I believe we'll see this fight, but it'll probably play out the same way when it happens now than it would have when Keith Thurman was originally acting like he didn't want that fight. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. Also, if you're not a member of the Patreon, go check out the Patreon. We got a lot of really good stuff over there. Thank you guys who are joined as a member and everybody that supports in the live streams Monday through Friday and OG Boxing Talk on Sunday. And with that, we're out. Peace.